Well, greetings, blade fans. Here I am, back with you, this old sword, for my last best of for the year 2022. Maybe we'll do one more, Knives That Talk to Me, or something like that. I think a lot of us content providers with knife reviews tend to do that towards the end of the year, but we're exactly halfway through December, pretty much. This should post on the 16th of December 2022. And I'll call this my final statement of my favorites for the year. I've done so far production folders, production fixed blades, and now finally, since this is my year for custom fixed blades, I figured I would pick 5 representative makers to show you. So here we have on the table knives from Koens Craft, Morgan Koens, Dirk Pinkerton, TKell Knives, Roc Knives, and Josh Mason knives. Okay? And I've got 1 or 2 more, but I had to limit it to 5, and I would have to say these are my 5 favorite makers, as well as picks for the 5 favorite knives. I have multiples on Koens Craft, I have multiples on Pinkerton, I have multiples on TKell, certainly have multiples on Roc, and only that one for Josh Mason. So let's start with Josh. This is a beautiful little blade that I'm going to have to look up the steel. I'll have that for you in a moment. He's simply calling it a hunter. I mean, there's no specific name for this. He made a few of them. I saw them on Instagram, and that's how this works a lot of times as far as these makers go, is they're pretty available on Instagram. That is, the makers are accessible on Instagram. Look at the beautiful satin finish that Josh puts on his blades, and I would say pretty even plunge grind. A little better on the left side than on the right side. If you want to get picky, just changes up in there. These are some of the things that you notice about the different makers, and you're paying attention to the fact that these aren't machine made, these are made by hand, these are hand ground. In some cases the maker will use a contraption to hold the blade while he grinds it, but so many of these are simply hand ground, and that's the beauty of it, to have a fully custom made knife. It may not be a custom design because they may do multiples of them, but they are made by one maker. These are all USA made, nothing from overseas. So you guys that don't want anything Chinese, this is the way to go. Now that oddball steel I forgot the name of for the Josh Mason is 8670M. 8670M. It's kind of a steel that they used in tools. It is a high carbon steel, therefore rustable. All of these makers provide sheaths. No, I'm sorry, they don't all except one, and I'll get to that in a moment. Let's see what Josh provided here. So Kydex for Josh. And what happens sometimes with Kydex is if there's a slight bit of debris in the case, you get little scratches like that. So Josh agreed to refinish this one, which is really very great of him, and I do appreciate that, because it's such a beautiful knife, and it's probably going to be less of a user and more of a collectible, since it's the only knife I have from him, and the grinds are just so darn nice, and I love that clip point. It is a G10 handle with red pegs holding it on. It's also glued on, I believe, not removable, with a lanyard hole, and just real comfortable to hold. Good long handle and a slightly shorter blade, so it's a good working knife should you choose to use it as a skinner, hunter, or what have you. So I'm going to put these in the sheaths as I talk about them. Good sheath with a heavy-duty belt loop, so you can wear it inside the pants or scout carry or what have you. Put that aside, and let's just go up the line from smallest to largest. Here is a black Roc knife, the Ken Vehicate. I always get tongue-tied saying his last name, Ken Vehicate. Black Roc Knives, well known for some of his designs for fox knives, but probably more well known for his exquisite hand work. And this is a man who suffered a stroke not that long ago, and seems to have come back strong and is producing many different models lately. Check him out on Instagram. I will leave a link, an Instagram link that is, to each of these makers, so you can get to see more of their work and contact them, DM them if you're interested in having them make a knife. So this Black Roc is called the Boot, simply called the Boot. It's a ring dagger. So yes, you can hold it with your fingers through the ring. I find probably, as Bob DeMarco has been showing lately, and I think Lynn Thompson has mentioned, that on many of these dagger style knives, the ring he feels, that is Lynn Thompson feels, is for the thumb. So I would say it's not an uncomfortable way to hold it, and it does hold it securely for thrusting type movements. Now, this is not your average knife that you're going to be using in the outdoors for skinning or what have you. This is definitely a combat style dagger. It is about a 5-inch blade, and by the way, there are individual reviews on each of these knives should you be interested. It's a 5-inch blade. He brings the G10 right up onto the blade, which I find is really interesting. And I had asked for this particular G10, which is a gray and black. When he puts these rock cuts in there, this texturing, you get such a cool symmetrical pattern. And Ken is known for his work on the surface treatment of his knives with all of this texturing. I call it a kind of a rock pattern, but he does an exquisite job of just hand grinding that texture in there, both the handle and all the way up into the ring on this one. It makes it look ancient, but at the same time, the profile of the knife is extremely precise, and he does a great job sharpening. Nice placement here for your finger, should you want to do that, all right, on either side. It's a completely symmetrical design, and he has done a great treatment on the sheath. Ken does some of the greatest kydex of, I would say, any custom maker. This one's got an integrated clip. You can actually slide it into your boot or into your pants. Certainly, although there's grommets here, which means you can't really take it off, you can add whatever hardware, mounting hardware you want right on the side there. So we have kind of a medium gray kydex sheath. The fit is perfect. There's no rattle. He does a great job pressing kydex, and it's never difficult to get the knife out. It holds it firm, but withdraws pretty easily. So I said I would be putting each of these into the sheaths, and I'm going to get you the name of the steel. So we got 80 CRV2 for the boot. 80 CRV2, again, a high carbon steel. And I think before I get to the TKell, I'm going to get you the steel that that one is made from. I got my list here. Bear with me, if you would. So on the TKell, this is the Mercenary, which I did know, and it is in 1095. Now, he does 1095 with a nickel boron finish, and that makes it extremely slick and extremely corrosion and rust resistant. I believe he's changed the coating somewhat since this knife, and you notice that cloudy pattern, that is the coating on there, and it is just slick as Teflon. But also, so basically what it's doing is on the cut or the thrust you have less friction, and therefore you have greater cutting and penetration ability. Now the Mercenary, as the name might imply, is kind of a field knife, do-it-all, combat knife, field knife. And I have to say one thing about TKell's knives: they are all laser sharp when they come to you. Really, really fine, sharp edge. I'm not going to do any paper cutting today, but trust me, this thing goes through paper, as an example, like a laser. He's using the new fasteners, which can be removed. They have a trademark name. I mention all of this in the review of this knife, so if you have an interest, again, pull up that review. Got some heavy jimping here and a really usable finger choil. Very, very nice. Kind of a drop point, clip point sort of a blade. The blade itself, I believe, is about a 6-incher. Yeah, if we go all the way back here, it's a 6-incher. The edge is 5 inches. So we got a good usable edge that has a forward belly and a nice straight line there. So pretty much for just about any task. Tim also provides an excellent sheath with many different mounting options. He also puts a tensioner on his sheaths, which I think is a really tremendous idea, and it can be loosened and actually slid up and down to give you more or less tension on the knife. When it first came to me, it was pretty tight. I loosened it up a little bit. The other feature he gives you is a notched thumb ramp for pushing off. Just excellent. I would say the thoughtfulness that goes into his sheaths is right up there with Ken Vehicat's, and then maybe a few extra features. So again, you've got slots to mount hardware wherever you want. This is kind of a special raised mount with this platform here. This can be taken off. Everything can be modified and moved on this knife. These are his bullet grips, I believe, and it came, I think, with a black G10, and he gave me an extra set of grips, so this is the OD green. Nice thing about his knives, you can easily remove the grips and change them out. So whatever color combo that you want to use, it is available to you. And I will mention one other thing about TKell. I had the thinking that they were sort of semi-custom, but I've read up recently on his website, and although some things may get outsourced, the bulk of the work is done in his shop by multiple people as far as I know. Kind of along the lines of Stroop, if you've seen their manufacturing. That's as much as I know. I will say, however, that they qualify as a handmade, custom-made knife. Great work, TKell. And again, you'll see links for all of these up on this review. Here's a recent acquisition, and I would say my showpiece from Dirk Pinkerton. I have two others of his blades, both of which are dedicated TKell or TKell point down edge in knives. This is his Razorback. So far we got the boot, the Mercenary, a Hunter from Josh Mason, and this one is the Razorback. And this is my special modification of his Razorback. I'm not sure if he's done this before. I had asked for a sharpened top swedge. Now it's a bit of a trailing point, ever so slightly. You see the point does come above the back spine of the blade. I had also asked for the jimping, a full run of jimping, which allows you to choke up and put your thumb here in a hammer grip, or back here in a saber grip. And it is very grippy jimping. I also asked for the Python micarta, a real interesting multi-layer micarta. And Dirk did a tremendous job in putting texturing on it that brings out a pattern. 3 removable Torx screws there, so I believe you can take these scales off. You could probably customize your own scales if you wanted to. It is a heavy knife with about, I think, at least a like a 4.5 millimeter, 5 millimeter, talking off the top of my head. Again, individual review time if you want to look at that. Yeah, 4.2 millimeter. Looks a little thicker, but 4.2 millimeter blade stock. Really fine point on this. Some may feel too fine, but when you grind it on the top and the bottom, you remove material and you end up with a little less material at the tip, but very piercy, very slicey, hollow ground. And this one is Magna Cut. And I almost forgot to mention that. New Miracle steel there, Magna Cut. Sheath on this one, pretty rudimentary. Dirk likes to use a sheath that kind of swallows up the handle, and it definitely is not going to loosen up or fall out on you by any means. I asked for the thumb ramp. Because this comes up kind of far, the thumb ramp's back a little bit, but it still locks in nicely and comes off nicely. Dirk does not give you any mounting hardware. He leaves that up to you. He does ask you where you want the grommets, however, so you can have, I can always have them a little higher, a little lower, or what have you. So that's the Razorback Custom from Dirk Pinkerton. Finally, and I've picked up more of these than I care to mention in a short period of time this year. This is the Commando from Koens Craft, Morgan Koens up in Canada, Ontario, Canada area. A fully custom knife. I was going to have the handle treatment one way. He suggested another, and I'm glad I listened. And I've got one more on the way from him and one more in progress. Just a beautiful pattern that he hand dremels into the handle scales. So we have here kind of a greenish desert tan patterned, and it just feels so comfortable in the hand, so confidence inspiring and solid. He puts this smoke tiger stripe sort of pattern on this. This is Nitro V. He likes to work a lot in Nitro V. He hardens his own, heat treats his own blades. This is coming in around 60 Rockwell, I'm told. There is always a variance on Rockwell. You can't get it exactly, as far as I know. Whether you are a manufacturer or a custom maker, that is a tough proposition. So we're going to call this 60 Rockwell for sake of argument. Nice guard down below, nice finger groove, not really a finger groove, but a stop there with a lower guard. A barely protruding top guard gives you a little bit of security there, but also allows you to put the thumb out here. Not jimped, it is smooth. He does not do a lot of jimping other than some very heavy jimping, and I didn't want the heavy chainsaw sharpener file jimping on there, which was the option. You will always see on Morgan's work the large fuller. Well, not always, but very often, especially on his larger blades, that big, shallow, trench-like fuller, which I think is sort of his trademark. Now, no sheath with this one. Morgan does not get into doing sheaths, but does give some suggestions for some custom leather makers that have done some excellent work for his sheaths, particularly Nixon Leather, and you can locate Nixon Leather online on Facebook. So there are my offerings, 5 offerings for 2022 as my favorite custom fixed blades. The Commando by Koens Craft, the Razorback by Pinkerton Knives, the Mercenary by TKell, the Boot by Roc Knives, and what we'll call the Hunter by Josh Mason Knives. Hope you enjoyed this. Don't forget to give it a like and subscribe. I'll be back with you soon. Be well. Take care.